regardless of race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation, feels marginalized or afraid in his or her own community. We must remember that there will always be more that unites us than divides us. It is up to us to stop hatred wherever we see it, especially in the halls of government. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Ross-Layton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the years, I have come down here regularly to the chamber, one of the most iconic symbols of our wonderful democracy, and urged the United States to do more to support the cause of freedom for my native homeland, the island nation of Cuba. And in tow would be posters, just like the one I have here today, depicting images of the real Cuba, the Cuba in which opposition to the Castro regime is met with violence and harassment, extrajudicial punishment and confinement in one of the many Cuban gulags built by Fidel Castro. These images would show what the regime under Fidel Castro would do to the ladies in white depicted here. These women clad in white, carrying flowers, march peacefully to Catholic Church every Sunday, praying for their loved ones wrongfully imprisoned by the regime, only to be harassed and beaten by Castro's thugs. I came to this floor to offer my support for these brave women, like Laura Poyang, who was mysteriously killed, no doubt by the regime, and Berta Soler, pictured here. Mr. Speaker, I have come to this very floor denouncing the Castro regime's treatment of opposition leaders like Jorge Luis Garcia Antunes Perez, who was in prison for 17 years by Castro for speaking out against communism and refusing the regime's communist re-education program. I spoke out in support of Dr. Oscar Elias Bisset, who was sentenced to 25 years in Castro's prisons for crimes committed against Cuban sovereignty, which in Cuba is code for calling for reforms. And he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by George W. Bush. And I stood here for Coco Fariñas, right over here. Coco Fariñas went on a 50-day hunger strike just recently to bring attention to the plight of the Cuban people. And I also spoke in favor of Cuban rapper El Sexto, pictured here, who was jailed just last week.
2, 3, testing.
I think we're going to start in just a few minutes, folks, so if everyone could grab their seats, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. And he's really objective, too, and I like that about him. Yeah, we're live. We're live.
Okay, just waiting for Rick. All right, Mr. Stingel's on his way in. Why don't we get going? So welcome everybody. I hereby officially call the meeting to order. Rick will be here in a second, but we have quorum even without him. This is an open meeting of the Broadcasting Board of Governors. being held in compliance with the Sunshine Act. A digital recording of this meeting will be available for on-demand viewing on the BBG website, www.bbg.gov. We've had some power problems this morning, but I believe we're on the air. For some reason, we go off the air during this telecast. We'll record it. We won't. Oh, Andrea assures me we won't, so we're not going to. So it feels like decades since our last open meeting of the BBG. There's a few things have happened. Who would have thought that the passing of Fidel Castro would not be our top news since the last meeting? But we've had an election since the last meeting, and I want to say a couple words about that, and then move on to a couple other subjects. But we're obviously in the middle of a transition. We knew we'd have one from either to one candidate or the other. And in the week since the November 8th election, the Obama administration has worked alongside President-elect Trump and his team to ensure an orderly transition to the next administration. The BBG is no exception. We stand ready to engage with the President-elect's team to ensure BBG's professional and efficient transition into the next administration. I know the transition team has started at the State Department. We have not started at the BBG yet, and it's not even clear we'll start before the inauguration. So that is good news. Given that we are independent. I'm proud of what we've achieved during the last years of the Obama administration, and I have no reason to believe we won't continue the good work under a Trump administration. The dedication of our team remains unabated. Our staff in Washington and around the world remain hard at work in service of our mission to inform, engage, and connect citizens around the world in support of freedom and democracy. Just a couple, I want to say a couple, I'm going to riff a little bit away from my talking points here and just say a couple words about this and then another subject. But, this is an organization that is set up to be bipartisan. And in fact, it's really set up to be nonpartisan. Our mission is neither Democratic nor Republican. It's American, which is, as I read just before, our mission. This board has come a long way. It's not just President Obama who's appointed some of us, but also Senator McConnell has appointed others. But together, the two of them have created a really great board here, who has accomplished a lot in a completely nonpartisan way. The biggest accomplishment we've had is actually creating a CEO position and naming a great CEO, John Lansing, who will be the CEO on January 20th before the inauguration and January 21st after the inauguration. And I don't see any reason to believe why the great work that we're doing around the world on behalf of the mission won't continue after that. This is something that happens in our democracy, and this organization was set up to continue regardless of changes in administration or personnel or anything like that. That being said, the board discussed it this morning. There is legislation pending in Congress that we felt like we would be remiss not to mention, given that it is very possible, maybe even likely, that the legislation will pass in the next week or two. And in fact, we expect the conference committee of the Senate and the House, I don't know where Lona is, to release the language from this legislation, maybe even during this meeting, if not shortly thereafter. It's an amendment that's currently attached to the NDAA, the Defense Authorization Bill. So that bill has to get through conference and then has to be voted on again and then signed by the president. If that were to happen, the legislation, we have not seen the final legislation. We'll see it when you guys see it, when the conference committee releases their work. But we believe that the language calls for the BBG board to become an advisory board, not a board in the traditional sense. It does memorialize the CEO position, along with the authorities that this board has tried to delegate with the CEO, then become delegated to the CEO by law. An interesting nuance to the legislation, as we saw it before, is that all of us continue to serve until our terms expire. All of us have terms that have expired, so all of us will not continue to serve. So there will be an advisory board if the legislation passes the way the language was that we saw it a couple months ago, that consists of no members the day after the legislation passes, whenever that is. John will continue to serve under the legislation until such time as the president either reappoints him or appoints somebody else to replace him, and the Senate confirms that person. Stay tuned, because this is what we believe, but until we see the language, we don't know. One additional point and then an overriding point, and then I'll open it up to the floor here. But the grantees, RFE, RL, RFA, and MBN, there is no change under the legislation to those organizations day one. They are nonprofit, private corporations, not public corporations. Therefore, their boards remain intact. The two pieces of the legislation that we believe that affect the grantees are, number one, the CEO of BBG in the future would appoint the board members of those grantee boards. And number two, the legislation authorizes the CEO of BBG to look to evaluate and if need be, execute on a consolidation of the grantees into one grantee. But that is an authorization, not an obligation. So it'll be something that John will dive into and look at the feasibility of and how it can be done. So, just taking a step back from all this, once again, if the language comes out during this meeting, we'll quickly amend what we're saying if the language is different. But I just want to say, just taking a step back for a second, the mission of this organization is crystal clear and kind of uncontested on both sides of the aisle. People know that what the mission is, which is to provide the truth around the world in a world that's becoming increasingly unfriendly to journalists. And that is a nonpartisan issue, not a partisan issue. This board has served an important purpose in the past as a kind of quote-unquote firewall to keep the organization independent from politics or anything else. And obviously, if the legislation passes the way it is, it'll be up to the CEO to keep the organization independent and separate. And I know John believes in it. I don't speak for John; he can speak himself. But I am confident that whatever happens, legislation passes, doesn't pass, that this organization, which is to use Governor Kempner's words from a previous meeting, is a true jewel in the U.S. government. We are doing good around the world, and we're doing unquestionable good around the world, and we've made a ton of progress. And I don't know how many people watched the webcast of this meeting. I hope a lot. But to those of you journalists out there risking your lives every day on behalf of this mission, we support you. And as the organization goes through changes, if the legislation passes, I don't see any reason why that support won't continue to be strong and continue, if not strengthen. So anyway, that is I'm sorry to be vague. As anything happens with pending legislation, you don't know what it's going to say or if it's going to pass. I like to joke before that you actually had legislation today saying today was Wednesday. There was never more than a 50-50 chance that it would pass the Congress. So who knows? But every indication is that there's a good chance the legislation will go through. So, John, why don't you say a couple words, and then any board member who wants to jump in.
Thank you, Chairman Schell, and I appreciate your comments. I would just underscore the comment you made about the importance of the independence of our journalism. And that independence is something that's protected by a firewall that's hardwired into the founding legislation of U.S. international media. And that's something that I believe in to the highest extent possible, and I know all of our network heads believe in it as well. And when you think about it, the importance of the firewall and the importance of our independence is that it allows us to be credible around the world where credibility is in decline. And so to the extent that the BBG networks are the only credible or the primary credible source of news and information in parts of the world starving for news and information, that's the critical mission that we're here to protect.
Just to add to that, from the previous meeting, we talked about in the early days of some of our networks, we were the alternative. There was a state-owned broadcaster beaming out propaganda, and we were the credible alternative that believed that by telling the truth, we could best express American values to people around the country, to people around the world. Now in this world awash with stuff, many of it fake, many of it, people in their pajamas sitting at home making up stories to try to get Google advertising revenue. in a weird way, our mission is as needed as it's ever been in our history. It's just a different way. So it's interesting. Anyway, any other board members? Rick, you're reaching for the button. You go ahead.
Yes, I just want to piggyback on what both of you have said. Regardless of what happens with the legislation today, some of us automatically become pumpkins on January 20th. And as the Secretary's representative on this board, I want to convey his gratitude for what you have all accomplished. I think we can all agree one of the things that we're unanimous about across the aisle is the extraordinary leadership of Chairman Schell, who has brought everyone together around the mission, which is unchanging, which, as you say, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a moment, is even more important now than it was when you started. And you've taken a board that was less than ideal and made it a really working, functioning, pragmatic, enjoyable board. And I know we all share that, and I think people will chime in on that. I would add one of our great accomplishments is bringing in John Lansing, who is a superb executive who believes devoutly in the mission, but also knows how to execute it. And that's a rare accomplishment in the journalism business, which I know that people to combine those two things. But I'd only add that I do think the mission is even more vital than it's almost ever been, even during that dangerous period when it was first started. I mean, we're in a global information battlefield, and in that battlefield, the question is how does the truth triumph when it's being questioned on all sides, when there's a manufacturing of disinformation? We've seen it both in the weaponization of information with extremist groups like ISIL, and we see this kind of tsunami of misinformation and disinformation that comes from Russia and some of its partners. It's, as some very smart scholar said, it's not, in that case, it's not so much an information war, but a war on information, a war on credibility and an authoritative rendering of the truth and reality. And I think that's the thing we heard and we've talked about beforehand, is that is the mission of all of the entities of the BBG as a whole. And I hope and believe that truth will triumph. But what we see in this battlefield of ideas is that fact doesn't always win out. And I think that's another reason why we all have to be innovative and experimental in figuring out how we can give fact-based information to people and have it be something that people trust and believe in and act on.
Thank you, Jeff. So when I had the honor of being appointed or nominated by the President Obama to this role, I had 18 months between clearances and Senate approval to learn and study the organization. And mostly, frankly, what was out there was not particularly positive. And so even somebody who had spent time trying to learn, and he came here and did meetings and met people. I went to my first board meeting, and I forget, it was over at RFA. It was the potluck dinner day, and I walked. Yes, yeah. And I sat in the meeting, and then I walked out, and I said, "Wow, this is really important." But I had no idea, even as somebody who had studied it, how actually important it was. And so I've been fortunate to spend the last few years working with truly extraordinary, and will go down as historic, Chairman Jeff Schell. I mean, the speed and determination by which this organization was not only fixed, but turned into a shining example of how the government should work. So we can talk about it being fixed. We're way past it being fixed. I mean, today I tell people I serve on a lot of boards. This is one of the most highly functioning boards and organizations I've ever sat on. I've been honored to work with an extraordinarily brilliant and committed board, and frankly, when I look at their resumes and listen to each of them speak, I'm actually humbled by the fact that I'm even sitting among these extraordinary minds. What continues to frustrate me is that not enough people really know or understand what we do and how vital this is to the United States and frankly people around the world. The number of people when I travel, whether and speak, whether it's Liberia or Europe, how the VOA and others are really their trusted news source. That's the only place they turn to. That's the only place they trust. So I say that so with great compliment and great humility and appreciation for the ability to participate, Jeff, with you and my fellow board members. But I also, frankly, do want to say something about this legislation that is likely to pass and likely to be signed into law, is that I truly hope, and I'm optimistic, but truly hope that this was not an historic blunder by the Obama administration, who I think my record of admiration for is strong. I'm very, very, very proud to have been appointed by him and to have supported him. I truly believe eliminating what is a worst and nonpartisan at best board that ensures that extraordinarily people like John and his team can continue to do their job in a way that is in the best interest of the United States is potentially in jeopardy. Because at the end of the day, particularly in a environment where post-truth environment, if we're ever seen as not the truth, then it doesn't matter what we do. And so if this happens to be our last board meeting, I leave with great optimism because of the work that we've done in installing John and letting John bring on incredible people like Amanda and the rest of the team, Tom, and obviously everyone else who's been here and the new people. It is just a great organization. So I'm optimistic that John and his team will continue to move us forward in a way that we just saw the presentation, in a way that is modern and changing and very cognizant of the world we live in today. And even if there is no board, I know I can speak for other board members that we're here to help in any way we can to make sure that your mission of telling America's story and the mission that Libby and everybody else has continues to be told in a truthful and impactful way. And I just hope we don't look back on this time and say, oops, I wish we would have done things differently. But I choose to leave with optimism and gratitude and hope and also gratitude, as Jeff said, to the extraordinary brave men and women around the world who are truly sacrificing their lives in an era where it's getting harder and harder and harder for them to practice their craft. So I am here. So again, thank you. And please know that no matter what, we are always here to help.
Thank you, Michael.
I just want to second everything that everybody said and just thank Jeff for your leadership and the other board members as well. It's been a privilege and an honor to serve with everybody, should this be our last board meeting. And but I mean, the expertise that this board brings together, the proactive attitude, the lack of ego has been great. And I think as a result, the staff has been able to soar. Given the support that you all need, and it's a model. I think what's so encouraging about where we are today is that I think we're modeling exactly what this agency can and should be, And I think that's evident for anybody to see. And I think it's, obviously it's an incredibly important mission that we have independent, objective journalism, or as I think Tom said last time, is it muscular objectivity? I love that. We ought to patent that. That's really great. So I have to say I regret the legislation because I always think checks and balances are a good thing, but I feel very hopeful that given how you're modeling what this agency should be, given how there's such an appreciation for the importance of what you do, that you're going to just continue to soar and to do all this great work. And I really look forward to working with you all and to, giving you any support we can give you in the future, but just to witnessing the important work you're all going to do and the incredible impact that you're going to make. Thank you.
Wall somewhere.
So this is sounding like a post-mortem for the agency, and it is not. So I just want to start off with that. It is unfortunate about the way this legislation is framed and worded, but I think I know that this agency is going to continue, and there's going to be a strong firewall in place because, as Rick so eloquently said, there's a unique utility of this agency to the audiences. It is operating in areas that don't understand but desire and hunger for and willing to risk their lives for news, for truth. They, perhaps more than the audiences that are not ours, understand what propaganda is, and that is why they seek out our content. They want to be empowered by that. They want to know the truth. Jeff, I want to thank you for your leadership. We have talked quite a bit. There were times it was once a week, seemingly more. Other times it wasn't. But really, it was a great experience. And your leadership, your guidance here at the helm for these past 10 years has been really wonderful and terrific. And then, Rick, appreciate your time here on the board as the Undersecretary, and it has been an honor and privilege sitting next to you, and appreciate what you have done over at State as well as here. No, I did. I got you replaced another Michael. There's always been a Michael on my left. And John. Yeah, sorry. John, thank you. I mean, we're really fortunate that that you have found the CEO, and he is really remarkable, and really appreciate your time here, and I appreciate what you will do to continue to defend the agency and defend the firewall and defend the mission, and continue to push this agency forward. And we have seen a tremendous uptick in the quality and quantity of this news. It is again, it is a food for the people. They hunger for it. They need it, and you're supplying it because, again, not only are our readers, listeners, viewers dying to watch our stuff, but so are our reporters, and you're defending them. And I think that's not well understood. And I'll say that I've been in, Michael has been watching this for 18 months before he came on. I have a master's degree in public diplomacy, and I've been in this space for 10 years. We have a new executive director of the Advisory Commission on Public Diplomacy that I'll introduce. I was in that role before, and I had the oversight responsibility of this agency. Oh, by the way, Rick, there's Sean. I have the, I hired him too. Yeah. I had an oversight responsibility over this agency, but I'll tell you, it wasn't until I came in as a board member that I actually understood what this agency does. And that is a challenge we have in telling our story. But the story that this agency now has is so much different than it was 3 years ago. And I think its impact and value to the United States and the United States foreign policy and to our audiences is tremendous. And it is nearly night and day from what it was in 2013. So Ryan, Karen, Ken, Leon, Michael, thank you so much. And Jeff, again, thank you.
At the risk of echoing what's been said, I really just first want to praise Jeff for setting the absolute highest standard of leadership for us as a board and throughout the agency and throughout all of the entities. It starts with your three-dimensional approach to management and the wisdom you bring to the table, your incredible partnership with Rick, who is a completely unsung hero, and that partnership has been key to the unbelievable reforms that have been implemented here to bringing the best possible talent, beginning with John and Amanda Malule, the others around, Tom, obviously, et cetera. Brian Libby around the table have allowed us to achieve a huge number of things and has frankly made the reform legislation very different than what it looked like a few years ago when the BBG board was, as I described when I was first approached about possibly joining the board, was sort of like and this is more for the RFE, the older RFE types, of sort of like the Albanian Politburo without the handguns. You've brought us to a level of comedy, ITY, friendship, and you've done so not by setting a low bar and looking for the lowest common denominator, but really encouraging everyone to think outside the box. You've set high goals, high ambitions, and have shown just what an agency transformation should be like, and it's something that partisan issues have never arisen here, and the agency, the mission is obviously more important today when you look at what's going on in Cuba, what's going on in China, with Eastern Europe and the like. And so Jeff, you hand this agency off, and the incredible, inspiring people both around the table and out in the field, including, and everyone who puts their lives, their families' lives at risk, we think of constantly. So the agency, I think, really is in extraordinary shape as you hand it off. And I just really want to congratulate you, Jeff, and you, Rick, for the extraordinary work that you have done in transforming the agency and ensuring that the reform legislation actually looks very different than what it first did. So thank you.
Microphone. Thank you for all the kind words. If the legislation doesn't pass, you guys are not excused from the next board meeting. So it's always a risk of saying goodbye when you may not be going goodbye. If it is the last board meeting, though, I have failed in two respects. I had two goals that I did not meet. One was to have 10 public speakers, which is our maximum. We've never had more than 4, I think. Failed at that. And then
we don't know yet today, do we?
We have 1 signed up today, so it's unlikely we're going to make it to 10 unless anybody else wants to sign up, right? There's still time. If you're outside the building, come on in. My other goal was these threats to the press section that we read. I was hoping one board meeting we would not have any threats to the press, and every board meeting it gets longer. I went to Turkey as a tourist 3 or 4 years ago, and who would ever thought that Turkey would be where it is now, arresting and throwing journalists into jail and everything. So it's unfortunately this section has gotten longer. So let me, as I do at every board meeting, outline some of these threats. And I failed in not having a section on this as well. So anyway, this past Friday, the Tajikistan Foreign Ministry revoked the accreditations of 6 Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty correspondents in Dushanbe, Tajikistan's capital city, after demanding that RFE-RL remove within 5 minutes a story on its website about the appointment of one of the President Emoli Roman's daughters to a post in the Foreign Ministry. The Foreign Ministry has given no explanation for this action. Their decision is distressing and totally unacceptable. It substantially impacts our operations in Tajikistan, since Foreign Ministry accreditation is required for citizens to work for an international media in the country. Our Friday story was based on a personnel list published on the ministry's own website and on a source in the ministry who confirmed the appointment. Therefore, we rightly refused to remove the story. Earlier, authorities demanded we take down a story reporting a travel advisory issued by the U.S. Department of State warning citizens about travel to Tajikistan. That report, too, remained up because it was truthful. And as of today, the Bureau remains open, and the remaining staff continues its fair and honest reporting. We on the BBG board and across BBG fully support our RFE-RL professionals in Tajikistan. On behalf of all of us, I say thank you and continue your work with our full endorsement. And I know, Tom, we've been in constant contact about that. We support you, too. It's a difficult situation. We also call on we also call on the Foreign Ministry to immediately restore the accreditation of the 6 journalists. Failing to do so can only be interpreted as a signal that the government has no regard for international norms of freedom of the press and expression. And in a few minutes, actually, we're going to come back and vote on a resolution in support of RFE/RL's journalists in Dushanbe. The situation in Tajikistan is unfortunately not unique for BBG journalists or really any journalists right now active where we are. Let me outline just a few of the most concerning cases. In Turkmenistan, RFE/RL Turkmen service freelancer Sarpedminad Nebroskulev remains in prison and incommunicado. His colleague, Sultan Achilova, was attacked on October 25th, attacked again on November 8th, and a third time last Friday. Additionally, RFE/RL Turkmen service correspondent Roshan Yazmamedov was previously detained by Turkmen officials in 2013 and was summoned by police and questioned for several hours about his cooperation with RFE/RL in late October. In all, 10 contributors to RFE/RL Turkmen service have been attacked in a continuing government-inspired campaign. Our website's been blocked since 2015, forcing readers to use other means to reach it. By the way, it's reminded that only a couple of years ago that we were talking about, is RFE/RL relevant in the world anymore and necessary? So it's a lesson to be learned that things change, unfortunately, quite fast. A Radio Farda freelancer, Rasul Mahmoud, was seriously injured on October 20th while reporting from the front lines of the Iraq Army's campaign to drive it out of the city of Mosul. Mahmoud is now in a hospital in Ankara, Turkey, where doctors are trying to save the sight of one of his eyes. Radio Farda has set up a GoFundMe campaign to support Mahmoud and his family. Thank you to those who have contributed. Crimea desk contributor Mykola Semena remains under house arrest in Russia, annexed Simferopol. He has been prevented from leaving the peninsula to receive medical care. We welcome the release of VOA Kurdish service reporter Hatice Kamer, who was detained by Turkish authorities in Dayikabar over the weekend on bogus charges. She was covering a mine accident when police confiscated her equipment and accused her of propagandizing against President Erdogan. While we are glad she was released, we call on Turkish authorities to put an end to the harassment of journalists in that country. We condemn, unfortunately this list could be a lot longer, as many of the service people know. We condemn the threats to our journalists and those to all journalists, and we call on local officials to hold those who are responsible accountable. And I'm sorry if I butchered some of the names and places here. With that long introduction, let me turn to the business before the board today. Presence of 5 or more governors satisfies the board's quorum requirement. By the way, just as acknowledged before this board was appointed, I believe that the previous 4 board meetings had no quorum. I don't think we've missed quorum one time in the last 4 years. So that is part of the battle is showing up. So thank you for board members showing up at these meetings. And because we have a quorum, we may conduct business based on a majority vote. On November 16th, the board received by email materials for the consent agenda, which allowed sufficient time for all governors to review the agenda prior to this meeting. We didn't receive any comments from governors. On November 28th, the board agreed to add a resolution to this consent agenda, as I just mentioned, to support the RFE/RL correspondence in Tajikistan to the consent agenda. In addition to this resolution, the consent agenda includes the minutes for the September 28th board meeting and a resolution for BBG meeting dates in 2017, which may be moot. We'll see. So at this time, I would like if governors have any questions or comments on the consent agenda. I don't see any. Who would like to move for the adoption of the consent agenda? Governor Armstrong, is there a second? Second, I think Governor Stingel got in before Governor Crocker. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The consent agenda passes. Matt always gets it. The board permits members of the public who register to attend our open meetings the opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes. We hope to have 10. We only have 1 member, so Adam, why don't you come to the table and introduce yourself and address the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, governors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adam Clayton Powell III. I'm the president of the Public Diplomacy Council, and I am a director of Washington programs for the University of Southern California's Annenberg Center for Communication, Leadership, and Policy. The views I present today are only my views and not those of either organization. Everyone in this building has a mission, explaining America to the world. So everyone in this building has a challenge, explaining this month's election to the world. To meet this challenge, you may want to step out of the building, this city, and even this part of the country. Because Donald Trump's victory is consistent with the will of the American people for the last 40 years and longer. Whether Democrat or Republican, the outsider almost always wins. A peanut farmer from Georgia came out of nowhere to become president of the United States. 4 years later, that peanut farmer defeated the money and power of the Kennedy dynasty and then himself lost to a movie actor from California. In a rare exception to the rule, George Bush succeeded Ronald Reagan but then served only one term, defeated by an outsider who grew up poor and all but politically and in a small town in the all but politically powerless state of Arkansas. And now we have the skinny first-term senator with a funny name who challenged the mighty incumbent's machine and wealth and power and became the first minority president in the history of the United States. It's all straight out of a Frank Capra movie. So today we have another outsider, and people from New York know that anyone who grows up in Queens always thinks of himself as an outsider. An outsider who, according to the latest FEC filings, was outspent 2-1 by Hillary Clinton and won. Donald Trump first beat the entire organized Republican Party to win the nomination, and then he beat the Democratic Party machine to win the election as an outsider. As Chris Matthews said last night on MSNBC, in every tweet he sent, in every speech he made, Donald Trump was saying, "I'm not one of them. I'm not one of the insiders." And he won. That's not too surprising. That's how American democracy works. The American people don't trust bankers and the rich and powerful people in Los Angeles or New York, and yes, here in Washington, D.C. So the American people throw them out with great regularity. And that is exactly what those who founded this democracy wanted. So this is how you could explain Donald Trump to the world. In a democracy, the people can prefer a peanut farmer to a rich heir favored by insiders. In a democracy, the people can prefer a poor boy from a small town in Arkansas to a rich heir favored by insiders. In a democracy, the people can prefer a young African American to candidates with far more wealth and power. You explained it by saying it was the genius of the founders of this republic to create the Electoral College as part of a system of checks and balances. So the rich and the billionaires, and yes, the media could not rule absent the will of the people. So as part of those checks and balances, we have the Electoral College, which obligates those who seek national office to go to West Virginia and Iowa, to Wisconsin and New Mexico, places they might not otherwise visit. That is why in America, the underdog can win. That is how a free democracy works. That is not how it works in Russia, where Vladimir Putin has his political opponents murdered in the streets. That is not how it works in China, where democratically elected dissidents are barred from taking office and dissidents in other countries are kidnapped and forcibly returned to face torture, prison, and worse. And that is not how it works in Cuba, where for 50 years Fidel Castro sent thousands to firing squads and where today dissidents are jailed and beaten, including the women in white. But what are the new president's policies? How to explain those to the world? Here again, we must reach outside of this building, this city, and this part of the city, where so few support him. Nothing resonated as much with Trump's supporters as trade, opposition to global trade. Global trade has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in Asia and Africa, an historic achievement. And it benefited us in this building, in this city, and in this part of the country. But that rising tide did not lift all boats. It did not benefit millions of our fellow Americans in places like West Virginia and Iowa and New Mexico, who lost their jobs to pay for our prosperity. So now your challenge is this. We need to explain to the world why millions of our fellow Americans, who people around the world rarely see in Hollywood movies or on CNN, rose up once again in the true American spirit to throw out the insiders, whether Democrats or Republicans, elect an outsider. We need to explain to the world how in a free democracy those who feel they've been injured by the wealthy and the powerful, and yes, by the media, can seek redress at the ballot box. And however these messengers are going to be structured, we need to explain to the world why this happened, why this is the heart of a free democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Well said. So now I'd like to turn it over to CEO and Director John Lansing. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
I would love to make a motion to require Adam to speak again, just because this may be the last time. So thank you. I don't know if you know it, but I'm the secretary for the Public Diplomacy Council. And I think it's remarkable and terrific, Adam, all the statements that you've been making here. It's truly impactful, and there should be something done with those and not just ephemeral and disappearing in this space. But I'm glad that you opened up these open comment sessions, because we've been able to have that type of input from learned folks. So thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Matt. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. And thank you, I agree. It was well said. So let me turn it over to our CEO and Director, John Lansing.
Thank you, Chairman Schell, and thank you for your support and the support of the whole board. My team and I appreciate it more than you'll ever know. So I want to begin today talking about really probably our most prominent recent addition to the BBG, and that's the creation of the Current Time Russian language digital network in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, the Baltics. It began as a conversation between the Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and the creation of a single half-an-hour show. And it's now grown into a 24/7, rapidly expanding cable network and satellite network. Extremely impactful, all in Russian. The creation of the ICC, when I first came into office back in September of 15, was intended to allow the 5 entities to work together and create a force multiplier so that we, rather than being competitive as networks at best or even unwilling to work together at worst, we now have a team at the ICC that meets with me twice a month, and we discuss opportunities for growing our impact around the world. And that was really at the heart of the creation of this new Russian language cable network. So I want to invite Tom Kent from RFL, who's the lead on the Current Time cable network out of our offices in Prague, and Amanda Bennett to talk about the progress we're making with this cable network.
Thank you, John. On October 3rd, we began operation of this 24-hour Russian language news and information network. It's a project of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty in cooperation with the Voice of America. In Russian, it's called Nastoyaщее время. In English, that's Current Time. We're on cable in 9 countries. We also stream live by satellite and on our website. So far, we're doing live news at the top of the hour for 10 hours daily, and we plan further expansion. I want to give you a look at a 30-second promo we run before some of our newscasts that gives you a look at some of the Current Time facilities. Current Time is dedicated to professional journalism and to advancing democratic values. We also expose false news, a growing problem in today's media environment. It's too early to get formal TV ratings, but with a strong digital component, Nastoyaщее время is already gaining a good following on the internet. Last month saw 2.7 million views on Current Time's website and mobile app. The biggest group of viewers is from Russia, followed by Ukraine. We look at our affiliates as programming partners. Over our facilities, we'll let them share programs with each other. We're also extraordinarily active on social networks. What kind of audience do we want? We're going for viewers across the Russian-speaking world, defined not mainly by home country, but by attitude. They're people with a positive view toward life, doers, entrepreneurs. To them, we offer an independent, international news network aimed at inspiring their ambition and humanity. And let me ask Amanda Bennett of VOA to say a bit about our initial business programming, because it's an attraction for our entrepreneur viewers.
So thank you, Tom. Largely from our studios in New York, we're providing business news that influences both parts of the equation. For example, the effect of the oil price and increasing American exports of oil. The administration-backed tech initiatives, which have produced entrepreneurial projects like the one that created a robot that would help handicapped people use their limbs. We are also looking at issues such as Russia banning LinkedIn and what the global impact of that was. We also do, in that hour that we produce, we also do entertainment and current events and sports and a little bit of travelogue, such as a history of the U.S. pioneers in the American West.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Tom and Amanda. Now I'd like to turn to Brian and the NBN Networks, Brian Conniff. You'll hear a little bit later in my report about our PAR report, our Performance Accountability Report, and what you'll hear later is that the growth among our digital audiences in terms of percentage growth was the highest of any other platform, and that was largely driven by the work being done at MBN through the Raise Your Voice campaign. And Brian, I thought it'd be interesting for you to report out on how the U.S. election was received through the digital and social channels of MBN.
Thank you, John. Yes, digital media and social media in particular give us a new opportunity to engage with our audience in a way not possible in the past. When Donald Trump was elected president, there was immediate curiosity from MBN's audience in the Middle East and North Africa about him and about what his foreign policy will be. While some Middle East leaders had expressed reservations, others welcomed his election. But as I said before, this social media platform provides us an opportunity to go directly to the individuals, directly to the members of the audience, engage their reaction. So that's what we did. This short video is representative of some of the reporting we did on social media right after the election, and it will give an idea of what our audience had to say. The day after the election, we put together a short slideshow, which was a bio of President-elect. Within about 24 hours, the video received more than 2.2 million views and was shared nearly 25,000 times. Clearly, our audience was interested. Over the course of the next few days, we posted a number of other videos and other articles about the President-elect, all receiving significant engagement from the audience. We also asked our audience to give President-elect Trump their advice for his Middle East policy. Once again, we received a lot of attention to this posting, and we also followed up with a Facebook Live discussion on the topic. People were very engaged. We received over 3,200 comments and opinions and advice to President-elect Trump. Some of what we heard, there was overriding sentiment that the President-elect should put an end to terrorism, extremism, and ISIS in particular. Many people wanted the newly elected president to stop wars in Syria and Iraq and to help rebuild those countries. A lot of responses asked the new administration to stop other countries, mainly Iran and the Gulf, from interfering in their local issues. Some of the audience offered him advice on American domestic issues. They wanted him to treat Muslims well, some even suggesting that he read the Quran. And not surprisingly, a few people even asked for business advice from businessman Donald Trump. One even suggested to President-elect Trump that he drink a lot of milk since he'll need all the health and energy he can muster for his new job. Overall, the reactions were very hopeful, but showed the signs of diversity in terms of the problems facing the region and the solutions that many of the audience believes we should pursue, or his administration should pursue.
Thank you, Brian. So I'd like to turn now to the winners of the 2016 David Burke Distinguished Journalism Awards. That's the highest award given by this board and the BBG to art journalists. It underscores the courage, integrity, and professionalism, particularly of our journalists in the field, who are often risking not only their lives, but the lives of their families as they go out and seek the truth, once again underscoring the critical nature and importance of our independence and our firewall. I've asked the ICC to each briefly discuss the winner. The way it works is there's one winner from each of the 5 networks. This year marks the 15th year since the award began, and tomorrow we'll be actually handing out the awards, but I thought the board would enjoy a preview of these outstanding journalists that represent the BBG every day out in the field. So why don't we start with Amanda Bennett and the Voice of America. Amanda?
Thank you, John. Aisha Tanzim is VOA's Islamabad bureau chief or correspondent there, and she's been with us since early 2015. In late 2015, she was interested in reporting on the extent of ISIS's hold in Afghanistan. She traveled disguised in a burqa through these areas, risking kidnapping and death, and she produced a almost exclusive look at the way that ISIS had made its inroads into those areas. She exemplifies for all of us that kind of courage that causes journalists to be willing to put their lives on the line for the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Now over to Tom Kent at RFERL.
It's an honor today to recognize the superb work of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Special Service for Crimea, a highly deserving recipient of the David Burke Award. The service is known locally as Krim Realii, or Crimea Realities. It's led by the intrepid Volodymyr Prytula. Crimea Realities is a lifeline for audiences in Crimea cut off from reliable local news since Russia annexed the territory. Crimea Realities also serves audiences everywhere who want to know what's happening on the peninsula. Today we recognize the dedicated journalists, editors, producers, and technicians behind Crimea Realities. Crimea Realities operates in 3 languages, Russian, Ukrainian, and Crimean Tatar. It launched just 2 short months after the annexation, an example of responding to events on the ground with vision and speed. The 40-member team produces 2 weekly 30-minute television programs. They run on Ukraine's national news channel, social networks, and our Russian-language Current Time. Crimea Realities produces an hour of daily programming on AM radio. It's also very active digitally. For the year ending in September, the Crimea Realities website logged 21 million visits and 46 million page views. People watch the team's videos on YouTube 11 million times. Because of their work, our Crimea Realities colleagues have suffered intimidation and threats. The website's been blocked by many Crimean ISPs, forcing viewers to connect by other means. 9 Crimea Realities journalists have been forced to leave Crimea with their families. Journalist Mykola Semina, who's still in Crimea, is under criminal investigation. Russian authorities have charged him with extremism for his work. He's currently under house arrest in Simferopol. As Chairman Schell noted, he's denied the right to leave the peninsula to receive medical care. Crimea Realities symbolizes the courageous and resourceful journalism of the BBG.
Thank you, Tom. And now to Director of the Office of Cuba Broadcasting and this year's Distinguished Service Awards for OCB, Malula Gonzalez.
Thank you, John. OCB's Burkis Award winner is Tomás Cardoso, a seasoned journalist and radio host of Radio Martí's daily news talk program Cuba al Día. He started as a contractor at the Martís 30 years ago. Tomás' program connects with members of Cuban civil society, human rights activists, independent journalists, bloggers, and everyday Cuban citizens. Tomás not only hosts the program, but he has developed the biggest network of contacts in Cuba and is able to receive story leads directly from the island and personally follow up on each and every story, hoping to find solutions, create a bridge, or to give a voice to the voiceless on island. In 2015, there was a particular story that Tomás worked that allowed a Cuban mother to reach out to him and who happened to work for the Cuban government to reunite with her son, who had been sentenced to 12 years of jail. Because of Tomás' intervention and continuous coverage, the UN intervened, and after the international pressure, the Cuban government released a young Cuban only with 2 demands: for the family to stop all communications with Tomás and Radio Martí, and that he abandon the island in the term of a year. That is what Tomás does every day in his shows, generate impact stories that change people's lives, and he does this by building trusted relationships that have helped the Martís bring to light hundreds of human rights violation stories and in numerous cases cause international organizations and governments to take action. Miles away from his homeland, in a newsroom where everyone respects him for his humbleness and ethics, Tomás Cardoso is an agent of change for Cuba, and that makes him OCB's Burkis Award winner.
Very good. Thank you, Malule. No area of the world offers more danger for journalists than those covered by Radio Free Asia. So I invite Libby Liu to discuss her Distinguished Service David Burke Award winner for this year.
Thank you so much, John. I am always so proud to participate in the Burke Awards, but today I am especially proud to join the BBG in honoring Vuti Hot from our Khmer service with the 2016 David Burke Award. Vuti has been with RFA for 18 years. He deserves this award for a lifetime of dedication, hard work, and achievements in making RFA's Khmer service among the most popular news outlets in Cambodia. He is the face of RFA in Cambodia, and as an news anchor for the service, he also works tirelessly behind the scenes as a trainer, a producer, everything. As a journalist, Vuti is nothing short of fearless. I think it's fair to say that we all understand how important fearlessness is as a quality, especially among the Burke Award winners. And it's very difficult to be fearless in Cambodia today. This is a country where the Prime Minister himself calls out the names of his enemies on national television. Parliamentarians are beaten in broad daylight on the street in front of Parliament. And reporters are imprisoned, persecuted, prosecuted, and murdered. Despite threats made against him personally, Vuti continues to report in-country on the many injustices the Cambodian people are facing, like election fraud, appalling work conditions, the lack of access to clean water in communities, illegal land grabs, and the persecution and plight of minorities such as the Montagnards. As an anchor of the Khmer Call Show, which is broadcast on radio and Facebook Live, Vuti has forced Cambodian officials to publicly account for their decisions, asking the tough questions that the state-controlled media refuses to touch. He's also designed and launched RFA's first daily TV program, which is enjoying immense popularity on social media platforms in that country. And I just want to say that Vuti is an inspiration, and he's a leader. He's exactly what we need, both for the Khmer Service and RFA. We thank Vuti, if you're listening, for your amazing work on behalf of your people. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby. And now over to Brian Connor on MBN. MBN has journalists on the ground in Syria and Iraq, from Aleppo to Mosul, and facing dangers every day to bring the truth back to those people on the ground. So Brian, who is your winner this year?
This year, we've chosen to honor our journalists in Yemen, an often forgotten area of conflict, given all the other problems that exist in the Middle East. We're nominating our three award winners have distinguished themselves with their bravery, integrity, and commitment, taking extreme risks on a daily basis to impart fair and accurate news. Al-Hurr's Muqtada Ashrafis reporting paints a vivid picture of the human tragedy unfolding in Yemen and has forced the world to confront otherwise incomprehensible suffering. From the border town of Hijaz, he provided a first-hand account of heavy clashes between Saudi forces and Houthi militants. He has explored the destruction of historic neighborhoods and the enormous strain on the healthcare system due to heavy bombardment and airstrikes combined with continuous fighting. Yemen's war coverage by Al-Hurr's Abdul Karim Ashibani exemplifies television journalistic excellence. He overcomes immense challenges to reach diverse sources, enabling him to present balanced reporting. At great personal risk, he has provided first-hand reports from throughout Yemen on the deteriorating humanitarian conditions faced by internally displaced people, specifically women and children. Radio Sawa's Arafat Mudabash tells Yemen's unknown stories from the country's hotspots. He passionately communicates the human cost of war, from disease, lack of food, lack of water, and poor medical care. In a hostile environment for journalists, Arafat lives in constant danger from al-Qaeda-affiliated extremists who have targeted him and accused him of treason and espionage because he works for an American radio station.
Thank you, Brian. Governors, those are our 5 winners. I invite you, if you're able to attend tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the auditorium here at the Cohen Building, where those awards will be presented. Now, turning to the FY16 Performance Accountability Report. On November 15th, the BBG released its FY 2016 report, and it includes our program performance data, and this year I'm pleased to announce a very, very strong story. BBG's global weekly audience grew from 226 million to 278 million, an increase of 52 million, the largest by a long shot, the largest growth the agency has seen in its history. I want to invite Jeff Trimble, the head of our Office of Policy and Research, and he'll highlight the details, and then I think Amanda and Tom will join you to look at some specifics. No, I think it's Amanda and Brian and Tom to look into some of the specifics of where the growth was in terms of our audience. So Jeff, please go ahead.
John, thank you very much. Governors, as John's indicated, this week the BBG published its annual Performance and Accountability Report, short name the PAR Report. It's on the bbg.gov website. Here's a hard copy of the report right here. Each federal agency has to do a PAR report each year, which is an integrated, substantive presentation of the agency's program performance, its financial accountability, and its managerial effectiveness. As John has indicated, this year's PAR report reflects a remarkable set of improvements in the performance data for BBG, and I'll come back to that in some detail in just a moment. I do want to point out that in the PAR, the BBG reports against its strategic plan, specifically the performance goals that fall under its strategic objectives and management objectives. Very importantly, this year, all of the performance indicators used in the PAR for these strategic goals come directly from the new BBG impact model. The impact model goes far beyond sheer audience size. It incorporates, for example, survey data for how credible our content is, how many people share our content, and if using our content has increased audiences' understanding of current events. And the PAR, and the impact model, I should say, does not stop at hard data. We also pay attention to anecdotal evidence, and this year's PAR report includes a lot of anecdotal evidence of success. So I'm going to unpack in 3 quick slides how the impact model reflecting impact beyond reach cashes out in the PAR report. And I'll remind first that the impact model, again, stems directly from our mission statement to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy. And we represent this really in 3 broad buckets by which we measure impact. The first being to inform people. Quantitative indicators as represented here include such things as weekly audience, credibility, uniqueness, web and mobile traffic. An example of quantitative impact is that, as you'll see in the PAR, this year over 4 in 5 BBG audience members consider the content that they consume somewhat or very trustworthy. And a qualitative example of informing, which we include in the PAR report, is this one from Radio Free Asia, using a mobile app, the mobile app WeChat, to get exclusive content to Chinese and Tibetans, and that's illustrated here in the lower right. The second bucket is engaging and connecting with audiences. Quantitative indicators include such things as internet traffic through circumvention tools, number of affiliates, digital engagement actions, sharing of programming. And a quantitative example of success in the PAR is that over half BBG audience members, over half, share news that they heard or saw on BBG products with others at least once a week. And a qualitative example is this one in the lower right, where OCB's Cuba Internet Freedom Conference connected Cubans. And in this particular photograph, a prominent Cuban human rights activist joined the conference live via a mobile app from Havana. The third bucket is to be influential. The quantitative indicators include understanding, increasing understanding of current events, understanding of American society, and understanding of U.S. policy. Foreign policy. So a quantitative example of success is that over 4 in 5 BBG audience members find that BBG content increased their understanding of current events somewhat or by a great deal. And a qualitative indicator that we include in the PAR report is this VOA town hall held in September, which brought together Mogadishu and Minneapolis, including in conversation with the president of Somalia pictured here. So now if I can go on to the next slide, back to the headline, John, which you've already given, which is we saw this year the largest ever year-to-year increase in the BBG's measured weekly audience, which now stands at 278 million. And as you see in the side, this well exceeds the target that we had set for this year. It's a 52 million audience increase from last year and a 113 million increase since 2010. I want to emphasize that these numbers reflect measured audience through surveys, actually asking people about their media consumption habits through in-person surveys and by telephone surveys. These surveys are complemented by a rich set of digital metrics that are also reflected widely throughout the PAR report. Most audience networks, so we could go on, Lori, to the next one, saw audience gains. First and foremost, the Voice of America, whose audience now has reached 237 million, a gain of 50, I repeat, 50 million audience over the course of the year. MBN and RFERL each have about 27 million weekly users, gaining about 2 and 3 million respectively. And Radio Free Asia has over 6 million. Radio Free Asia showed a slight audience contraction, and that's mainly linked to the increased media choices that people have in Burma, which is a major market for Radio Free Asia. So it's actually a good news story about the freeing up to some extent of the media market in Burma. And I'd also like to point out that Radio Free Asia has the particular challenge of having proportionately the highest number of language services targeting markets for which we cannot get representative data, such as North Korea and Tibet. Also, as has been the case in the past, the BBG does not have representative data for audiences for OCB in Cuba. Finally, showing you the audiences by platform here. Our weekly digital audiences on the right grew by 40% during FY16 to a current level of 45 million. Our traditional platforms also experienced significant growth, television gaining 23% to now stand at 174 million, radio audiences 27% increase to 130 million. I need to point out that these platform-specific audiences can't be added together to get our total weekly audience because we count unduplicated audience. For example, an audience member is counted only once, even if he or she consumes BBG content on both television and digital platforms. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Amanda to expand a bit on VOA's remarkable audience growth this year.
Can I jump in for 1 second, Jeff?
Sure.
Amanda, do you mind if I jump in real quickly? So
Please.
Just a couple things I just want to comment on, before we move on. Number one, I think this board's been very open and honest that audience reach is not our primary goal, that while we love seeing these numbers going up, the real point is to influence people and have an impact, not just get them to listen. Obviously, if they're not listening, it's hard to have an impact, or watching, it's hard to have an impact, so that's the first battle. So I wanted to just say that because it's not, I don't think we can wave the victory flag and move on the fact that our audience has gone up. But I do want to say that that being said, kind of digging into the numbers a little bit, and I don't want to, hopefully, Amanda, I'm not stealing your thunder, but the fact that our audience is going up so much in the largest, Muslim population in the world, Indonesia, is great. The fact that we've done a ton of work in Africa and that's starting to pay off in some of these numbers is really great too. So it's not the whole story, but it's part of the story. And also, the main reason I jumped in here is I wanted to take, once again, in the theme of maybe this is our last board meeting ever. Jeff Trimble has been a guy who has always been there for this agency long before any of us got here. He was a journalist, I think probably feels like 70 years ago, 80 years ago, Jeff. It's amazing given you're only, 38, but to have somebody who's a former journalism, a Russian speaker, an expert, and somebody who's always willing to jump in and solve whatever problem that we need has been, it's been an honor to Jeff to have you always here. And by the way, I hope this is not, it may be the end for our board, but not the end for you. You're a patriot as far as the work that's done here, and you're unsung a lot of the time. So I wanted to thank you publicly.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that very much. I've been around. I was reminded of this yesterday when I actually had to show a young VOA Ukrainian service correspondent how to insert an audio cassette into a deck and play it. She didn't actually know how they work. That's how old she is. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure I like that transition. But thank you, Jeff, and just seconding the the praise here. I'd like to put some of these numbers into a little bit of context here. As Jeff says, the VOA represents the majority of this extraordinary BBG audience growth. So VOA represents 94% of the total agency growth, but of that growth, 84% is coming from just two services, the Indonesian service and the Latin American service. So that means that 80% of our entire growth has come from those two services. It is significant, as Jeff Shell points out, because we have here the world's most populous Muslim country, a place of still active extremist activity and recruiting, and in Latin America, where many of the services are rated not free. And these two things have in common something that speaks directly to your question of influence and impact, and that is both of them have extremely robust and mature affiliate models. And that means not just that we drop content into places randomly, but we are very intensely linked with the producers of various shows at the networks in both of these areas. So we work producer to produce content that these networks want. So we have become an integral and trusted part of leading broadcast organizations, both radio and television, across both regions. And it has another significance that I'd like everyone to pause and consider. We have become essentially the Washington Bureau for hundreds and hundreds of television shows in Latin and South America. And at a recent visit by all these news directors, they spoke to VOA and said, please, please, please continue to provide us with this content, because we know we can trust it, we know it's objective, we know it's reliable. And if you were to pull out of this, the owners of our stations and our networks are looking at what is an ocean of free, high-quality content being offered to them. Now remember, this is Latin America and South America, being offered to them by CCTV, the China National Network, Persian News Network, and RT. This free content, very high quality. The station owners would love to run this if there was something not there. And the news producers, the people who understand the value of truth and accuracy, are saying, please keep providing us this. So our audience growth is also coupled with an increasing significance in really important parts of the world. Thank you.
Thanks. And as John indicated earlier, MBN's audience growth of about 2 million this year is closely linked to digital gains made by MBN through its content. So Brian, I think, will say a few words about that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Digital analytics and national survey data show that MBN's multi-platform Raise Your Voice programming is attracting and engaging millions of new users to websites, social media platforms, and broadcast. The first slide shows the growing role digital, including Raise Your Voice, plays in MBN's Iraq strategy. The chart shows the increasing share of MBN's Iraq audience regularly using digital data. This is an almost threefold increase from just a few years ago. Similar gains are being seen in other countries like Libya and Morocco. We expect the digital share to continue to increase across the region as people have more and cheaper accessibility to the internet. But digital media, as we know, isn't just about reach, but also allows for greater engagement and impact. The next slide shows the average daily engagement on the Raise Your Voice Facebook page, shows that it has increased fivefold over the last year, with stories and videos on issues such as the effects of ISIS brutality, the reason for ISIS coming to Iraq, ways to defeat ISIS ideology, all regularly generating thousands of reactions and hundreds of multi-sentence comments on a daily, weekly basis. In addition to digital media, Raise Your Voice radio and television call-in programs have added new audiences and increased impact. For example, Radio Sawa's Shuna Rayak's call-in program has added 3 million new listeners, and 80% of past week Iraqi TV audience say that the TV channel is providing them important information about ISIS.
Thank you. That's our report. The PAR's at www.bbg.gov. I'd like to thank the networks for their really hard work for making contributions. This is a really rich PAR report this year. To the CFO team for their ample contributions. Much of this report is about financial data. And finally, I'd like to thank Teresa Beatty, who was the team leader on this project in our office. Thank you.
And that is the conclusion of my report, Chairman Shell.
Great, thanks, John, and thanks everybody for the hard work. Any comments, questions from the governors about that or anything? Matt, go ahead.
Okay. One thing I won't miss if this is the last meeting of these microphones. So I mentioned earlier the executive director. There's a new executive director of the Advisory Commission on Public Diplomacy. If I may, Chairman, do a quick introduction. I don't know if I'll embarrass him. I'm trying to hold that out. It would be quick. But Adam may work at USC, but both Sean and I are graduates of USC, and I say that intentionally. Is an expert in international media. In fact, he helped out on the shortwave broadcasting report, and in fact, I think with regard to his expertise in Middle East media, that probably delayed his security clearance in getting his job. So he is well versed in many of our markets, and I think he'll bring a very informed voice. We've known each other for about 10 years. We've also co-authored a paper, The Marketplace for Loyalties. Remember that? So with that, I think, well, I know Sean is going to make a terrific executive director in reinvigorating the Advisory Commission on Public Diplomacy, whose job is to not just provide oversight of U.S. activities that inform, understand, and influence foreign publics, but advocacy, which, of course, the agency and anybody else, including public diplomacy, are at stake, can use. So, Sean, welcome. Thank you. So, do you want to say a few words?
I'm here to.
I wanted to say something before we adjourn. That would be a good time. Great. So, again, in addition to the thanks many of us gave earlier with kind of very sincere thoughts, I also think we need to thank the staff that's worked so hard for us. I mean, I know I'm going to be missing out some people, but you know, the day-to-day work with Rob and Nazari and Alona and Juan and so many others. I personally want to say thank you. You've always been incredibly responsive, frankly, incredibly proactive, and you're a very talented group of people that, you know, if any of you, now that I won't be on the board anymore, you can all come work for me. And so, yeah. But with that, I'm sure I speak for the rest of the board to say thank you very much. You're really a group of rock stars, and we could not have gotten, we talked about all the success we've been able to accomplish. At the end of the day, our success is very much dependent upon the work you do. So I want to say thank you very much.
I was actually going to do that too, and I want to just punctuate. You beat me to it, and I want to actually punctuate Rob Fallon, who has been an amazing addition here. There's been a lot of great hires, but Rob, just publicly for everybody, your job's not over yet; it's just starting. So don't think this is a thank you from us. But and I also want to thank. It feels like decades ago, but there was a time when we were trying to get just hiring a CEO in the federal government isn't quite as easy as I found it in the private sector. And it took us a couple of years to get the CEO, and while the place was adrift and we were going out and searching for John Lansing, in addition to Jeff Trimble, there was the trio that really held this place together. Andre Mendez, who's here, so thank you, Andre, and Susan. Mentioned Susie Carroll and Rob Bull, who aren't here, but who worked hundreds and hundreds of hours on my behalf and on behalf of the board, and this place wouldn't be in the place it is today without that group. So thank you guys for all the hard work. So the legislation might not pass. Okay, so let me just say before I adjourn here that we actually have another board meeting scheduled by law, and it's going to happen if the legislation doesn't pass. So please don't let me be the only one that shows up on March 23rd here in D.C. And we will continue to, until the legislation passes or not passes, we'll continue to work as a board the way we always have with the consent agenda and everything else. We actually do have boards of our grantees that need to meet. I think the feeling is if the legislation does pass, we're probably going to try to move up our next grantee meetings sometime in February, and the BBG board will meet as a coffee group or whatever it's called. I think Karen came up with a coffee group, name Friends of the BBG, sometime in February, so stay tuned. So if the legislation does not pass, our next board meeting will be here on March 23rd, 2017. If it does pass, then stay tuned and we'll be in touch on earlier dates, probably in February, sometime after the inauguration. So good board meeting. Who would like to be potentially the last governor to move that we adjourn our meeting? Michael Kebner. Who seconds? Oh, I think Ryan got in there. So Ambassador Crocker seconds. It's been an honor to serve with you guys. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, and our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, Josh. I forgot my.
God, a little bittersweet. I took yours. No, I took the big one. You take the.